Oh, hi. I was waiting for a little jingle, but I don't have a jingle yet. It's Benita Lee. This is virtual book club on Thursdays where Benita Lee reads to you. We have a special book, and we're going to do this for the next 3 sessions. If you're part of the regular book club, we've interrupted our regular book club for a live stream version of Trade War, Containers Don't Lie, Navigating the Bluster by Lori Ann LaRocco. Now, some of you may know her as a journalist from CNBC, and I love the inscription in the book. She dedicates it to her mother. To my mom, your words of encouragement and guiding hand have created the woman I am today. Thank you for always opening my eyes to what tomorrow could be and planting the seeds of determination that fuel my passion for reporting the truth. Love you. Now, if only like little girls out there were, following in the footsteps of people who want to spread the truth and finding the truth. That's the kind of world that I want to live in. I don't know about you. There's another lady that does Smart Her News on Instagram, and I follow her avidly. And to me, Lori Ann and Smart Her News are like my really trusted sources. So the first edition was printed in November 2019, and it's copyrighted by Marine Money. That's who Lori writes for. She's also appears in Freight Waves. So we're going to go into it. If you haven't gotten your copy, remember there's still 2 more sessions, so there's plenty of time to do that. Begun the trade wars have. No one can claim to be surprised that President Donald Trump now has the makings of the trade war he's always wanted. We're all forewarned during the 2016 presidential campaign when in his major foreign policy speech on April 27th in Washington, D.C., he reiterated that the world had grossly taken advantage of the United States and that he'd make it a less predictable nation on the world stage, and articulated his Sinatra doctrine of my way or the highway. As 2019 runs its course, President Trump has intensified his trade war with China. Factories have been slowing in major industrial nations. Global commerce has been deteriorating rapidly, and the rules-based international trading system has been badly frayed. All these trends rearing their heads represent perilous developments threatening the world economy with a pronounced downturn. And then, bam, pandemic happened. These are the forewords of the Mexican ambassador to the United States from 2007 to 13, Ambassador Arturo Sorokin. If these trends continue, they will undoubtedly and irreparably damage the global and interconnected economy, sowing even more social and political discontent across different countries, dislocating more jobs and feeding into authoritarianism and growing demagogic and chauvinistic populism, both on the right and on the left. History has certainly taught us the lesson of how that ends. I love how this book is like, I don't know, it's like it tells us, it's like the foreshadowing of what was to come, like this year. Few can deny that these economic and geopolitical dangers are unmistakable and mounting, threatening to spread from factory floor to households and to polling booths in many major economies, particularly in the Americas. Your World Trade Organization has alerted that intensifying trade conflicts pose a dire and present danger to jobs and livelihoods across the globe, while discouraging companies from expanding and innovating. The trade war and the weaponization of trade and trade policy by the current U.S. administration, along with the policy uncertainties about the future and the real and costly implementation and enforcement of trade restrictions, is wreaking worldwide havoc. Beyond USMCA's positive impact on international financial markets and new and key provisions on digital flows, energy, stronger IP protection, e-commerce, and safeguards against government meddling in trade and financial services, some issues, as the new rules of origin for the automotive sector, will continue to merit careful consideration. So, interruption. In regular book club, I select excerpts from the book and I read, and then I bring on the other members of the book club, which you'll get to meet afterwards, and we discuss. So thank you for joining us today, and I hope you have lots of questions and comments, because Lori Ann has offered to do like an a Q&A afterwards. So it might be today, it might be one of the other sessions. We don't know. When President Trump rammed through the renegotiation of NAFTA, the three North American partners should have aimed for an ambitious and groundbreaking agreement to ensure that the USMCA delivered the new gold standard for international rules-based trade. Instead, we ended up with a ho-hum combination of new disciplines mixed with managed trade in the auto sector. This has left some stakeholders with little incentives to push for congressional ratification beyond defending a framework similar to what we had in the past. Now both timing and political calculations and miscalculations are conspiring to potentially complicate ratification further. And then it goes into the TPP. In many ways, this book reads like a textbook of what trade professionals, CCSs, and import compliance people have been avidly watching for the last 4 or 5 years and should know. President Trump's approach to trade seems to be based on a false understanding of how the global economy works, one that has also plagued U.S. policymakers nearly a century ago. Essentially, the administration has forgotten an important lesson from the Great Depression. The most prominent trade war of the 20th century was ignited by the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930, which imposed steep tariffs on roughly 20,000 imported goods. Led by Canada, Washington's trading partners retaliated with tariffs on United States exports, which plunged 61% from 1929 to 1933. Sound familiar? This is how inflation is caused. Inflation goes up, prices go up. But there is little disagreement that Smoot-Hawley and the ensuing trade war exacerbated and prolonged the hardships of the Great Depression. And then, so that was written by the ambassador. So she had the ambassador with a foreword, and then there's also the afterword, which I think you'll really enjoy. So the preface In a world where diplomacy and trade negotiations play out in real time on social media, it is understandable how the global markets could move so suddenly over a 280 character tweet. This is the first time in history that the world can be a spectator to this diplomatic process. Traditionally, negotiations have always occurred behind closed doors. The global audience has only made aware when a deal was done or broken off. There was a distinct separation between the ebbs and flows. Those days are no more. Trade negotiations have become the world's #1 business reality show. The marriage of economic vitality to national security was consummated in 2016. Unfair trade practices were deemed not only unfair, but a national security threat. It's still talking about President Trump, or I don't even want to call him Donald Trump's philosophy. This approach to negotiation should not come as a surprise. Fair trade was among Trump's rallying cries, and his belief in reciprocal trade precedes his presidency. In May 2014, then public citizen, so this is before he was elected, Trump tweeted for a crackdown on China's trade practices. And then this is why you need the book, because look, you get to see Trump tweets and everything. Remember, China is not a friend of the United States. What you really should be getting from this book is that what we hear on Trump tweets or any tweets, and sometimes even in the media is not the way it used to be. How can we really take a look at what actually is happening? You look at trade data, and as customs professionals know, the way that you find trade data is through statistics and U.S. Census Bureau. How can one get a sense of the true status of trade and good faith being pledged by countries like China? Through the trade flows. The containers, cargo, LNG, and oil that travel on these ocean highways tell you what is truly happening. Promises and rhetoric are just words. The status of trade talks and whether the United States is winning can be revealed by the movement of trade. Because remember, 90% of the world's trade, global trade, has traditionally been on water. Trade flows are data. So in this book, you're going to read a real-time chronology of the multiple front trade wars. But more importantly, you're going to see data of the containers and cargo. I'm going to go a little bit into the prologue because I think you need this little bit of history to understand, why we're talking about China and the U.S. And why only those two countries come into the equation is because those are the two countries in the world where those are the two largest economies. So everything is always driven by the two largest or the largest, right? The United States' desire to expand its trade routes with China dates back to the 1800s. At the end of the century, the United States proposed the open door policy, asking for fair field and no favor, an opportunity for China to trade with all nations equally. The term was used again in 1978 when Deng Xiaoping, then paramount leader of the People's Republic of China, opened the country for foreign direct investment. U.S.-China trade relations were formally established in 1979 when U.S. President Jimmy Carter acknowledged mainland China's One China principle and granted full diplomatic recognition that Taiwan was an official part of China. President Bill Clinton later expanded trade relations with the signing of the U.S.-China Relations Act of 2000. This paved the way for China to join the World Trade Organization. The United States supported China in joining the WTO as a way of combating the non-tariff barriers and trade distorting practices of China, more commonly known as currency manipulation. The WTO was not designed to address trade deficit. It was designed to increase our market access and to increase, frankly, a level playing field with the rule of law so that our exporters and our workers can get a fair deal when trying to export to Chinese market, which brings to mind the concept of lawfare, which I learned at 𝗵𝗂𝗍𝗃, where, when some countries are using the rule of law and then other countries don't practice maybe the same laws, or they use the rule of law to kind of work against retaliating countries, then things get a little lopsided. And a huge thing about the China-US trade and deficit is technology transfers, China's view on world and global trade, its rapid ascent, the One Belt, One Road initiative, subsidies, and dumping. These are the sectors in which the Chinese government gives industry subsidies in China. So alternative energy and energy conservation, autos, aviation, banking, biological science, coal construction, environmental protection, information technology, insurance, and machinery. What do you think? I'm going to bring on the other members, the members that have joined us today. The awesome thing about virtual book club is really that I come every week to read, but only sometimes do certain members join. And today we're joined by, I think Chris is still there, Marilyn, Jose, Christina, maybe. Oh, surprise!
I made it.
Lori Ann.
I was on the phone with the CEO when you texted me.
Oh my goodness. It's so great to have you. Like, this is the most exciting book club session I've ever had. Where the
oh my goodness. Well, I'm just flattered that you're reading it and that, it was a labor of love, but unfortunately, you and I both know it's very relevant, unfortunately.
Totally. And Lori, today I was thinking that this, how when you get, like, if you're a PN and you go to 𝗵𝗂𝗍𝗃 to maintain your professional development points, they give you books like there's one I have on petroleum refinery, and then you get points on those books. Well, I think that, like, as a customs compliance specialist or anyone in, like, maybe exports and import that have those designations, or logistics, even like CITP, P-logs, like, or those supply chain designations. I think this book should go on that list so that they can maintain their accreditations And so
Oh, wow.
I'm willing to lobby for that, Lori Ann. How do you feel about that?
Separating it from, be blown away about how highly you think of my reporting, which I'm very grateful for. I think it's an unbiased look. And I think based on how I showed you how the flow of trade, my big moniker is, containers don't lie. And it's very simple because I wrote it for everyday Americans to understand the trade war. I think it would be beneficial reading, and it's a fast read because it's entertaining because you've got the Trump tweets in there, which, show you what we were told. And then I pull back and I say, okay, President Trump said this, but here's what the flow of trade told you. And we talked about this, with Secretary Mnuchin. And I don't know if a lot of people realize, but back over the summer of 2019, Mnuchin and 𝗫𝗫𝗍𝗪 were supposed to go to China to do, another chat, right, with the trade team. And all of a sudden, it just abruptly got pulled out. And at CNBC, and everybody was like, what the heck is going on? We got no information. Well, when I started looking into it that week, the same week that we were supposed to go, China inked a deal with Russia, where Russia allowed Chinese farmers to move to Russia, free, if you will, to use their land to grow soybeans. So they didn't need our soybeans anymore. And that is the reason why Mnuchin and 𝗫𝗫𝗍𝗪 didn't go. So, it shows that we're expendable. And so, as when you've read the book, for us to be arrogant enough to think that, oh, we're needed, you need our product, it's better, it's this and that. No. Brazil, over the course of time, right, they have expanded their trade with China. Look what's happened with the Amazon, right? They're plowing down Amazon to grow soybeans. Flow of trade will move. It's the plumbing. It's the plumbing that I write about in the book.
Absolutely. I loved that part. And, until I read the book, I didn't realize how important and significant that the soybean was when it comes to speaking about international trade. So I loved being schooled on that. Lori Ann, have you ever got to see like the reader's reaction to your words and your book?
Not really. Yeah, I never have. I've never really had that honor, so to speak. I mean, I have a lot of professors. The book is actually a textbook over at the Maritime School down in Houston. So it's required reading for logistics students. Because again, it's a really good history book. Yeah, and you did a good job when both Democrats and Republicans both love the book because they use the data and they squish it to their own, to their own messaging.
Spin.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I know I did a good job because it was funny because both Trump's people loved it and all the Democrats loved it too, as we were going through the political season. But I've never had the opportunity, besides like my family members or whoever who have read it, that will say, "Oh, we love it." But you love me. You're supposed to love my work.
Yeah, no, it's informative, it's fun, and it's fact. So those are, that's what we come for at Book Club. I want you to meet the members of Book Club, and guys, bring your comments and your questions and your perspectives and what have you. Mute when you're not talking, but it looks like Alan has unmuted. Alan, what say you?
Hello, everyone. I was looking, I'm not familiar with this platform, so I was looking for the button that says raise my hand so I can politely, as a Canadian, inject myself into this conversation. Lori Ann, pleasure to meet you. I haven't read your book. Only through the conversation with Benita did she talk about your book, and I'm very curious now. So I will go and get myself a copy of your book and read up on it. And so the questions I have may reflect my ignorance because I haven't read the book. So please forgive me
That's okay.
If it's touched in the book and I'm asking a really dumb question. Is the intention then, or one of many intention then, if we say that certain sanctions and policies were put in place, and really by looking at the movement of container ships, we're able to really gauge what's actually happening. Does that then allow us to look at policies and regulation and really assess the performance of such policies, right? In curbing and driving the type of behaviors and the outcomes that we want to achieve. And then from that, if that is the case, then really then it's around, okay, well, what are the appropriate trade policies in place to be used in the future? Does your book go into that?
I'm sorry. I cut you off in the last slide.
Sorry, it was. Does your book go into that aspect of sort of the policy design and whatnot?
Pretty much the way that my approach to it was what I like to call democratized trade, because a lot of people think you need to have gone to Harvard, right? You know, MIT, whatever, to really understand trade, and it's really simple. It's supply and demand. So I show you how, going back to my thing, containers don't lie. When you put in a tariff, like if you close your eyes and you picture a series of plumbing, the trade tariffs essentially created elbows because it was too expensive to buy our product because, China threw, tariffs on our product in retaliation, right? They went to Brazil. Instead of buying our soybeans, they bought a lot more in Brazil. But being a Canadian, you'll probably get a little thing about this, like a little laugh, is that they started buying, it was a 600% surge of China buying Canadian soybeans. The Canadian soybean is just north of the Dakota soybean. And a bean is a bean. The bean doesn't know if it's growing in the United States or in Canada. So it can tell you effectively, are we winning? The amount of product that we lost is an indicator if you win or lose. The retaliation, I even touch on the European, the European tariffs, how they slapped tariffs on whiskey. Now, we just recently heard about Biden saying they're going to, remove them. Until they're removed, those tariffs are still on there. So, putting on my CNBC hat, trade's a forward-looking indicator. So if you're looking at trade policies, you as a possible investor in whatever company, you ask yourself, who's going to be the winner? Who is going to be the loser? If you invest in maritime, okay, ships are like taxis. They get paid on what's called ton miles, all right, how much they carry. So when it comes to LNG, when it comes to oil, the further that you have to go, the more that they get paid. And so when it came to certain tariffs, if that eliminates a commodity and you invest in, say, an oil tank or an LNG, and they're going to be cut down, you have to ask yourself as an investor, okay, is this a good short-term play for me to be in this stock or not? So there's many different ways for you to kind of use that data, and it really is very simple. And so I break it down like it in these points where it's really common sense, right? I mean, in the end, China's going to buy what they buy. Like, for example, the African swine fever, okay, it decimated the pig population in China. They're huge pork consumption in China. It's one of their biggest proteins. They had to start buying hogs. So they did bite their lip and buy hogs from the United States. But now there's new data showing the pig population is back in China. They do not need U.S. pigs anymore. The USDA doesn't see that, and they say, "Oh, pig sales are going to continue to go through the roof next year." And people that are in that knowledge of knowing, like the seasonality of the trade, the supply and demand, they already know that there's going to be more culling of pigs. But on the flip side, if you grow the peas and you grow the soybean that feed the hogs, you're going to be able to sell more of that for feed to China. So you always kind of keep your thinking hat going, because trade really can be a forward-looking indicator, if you will, from all these various angles. And that's what's so exciting about it.
I was worried about the bacon prices a couple of weeks ago, but I have seen them levelize, so it's fun to see. Jim, it looks like you had some comments. And you were saying, not are the US only just the two largest economies in the world, but also two adversarial superpowers.
Yeah, no, they definitely are. And what you're seeing now, particularly, from Canada, like no one can escape the container crunch. No one can escape the congestion that we're seeing. And because China really is the manufacturer to the world, despite what they've tried over the years in expanding their services, they really are. It really shows how connected we are. And the flow of trade even got smaller during the pandemic, because trade takes people. And so there's so many different forward-looking indicators within trade, which is really so cool, is because we, the people, we buy the product, we the people make the product, and we the people move the product. And so there's a fun Scrabble term that I like to use called drayage, and that's the movement of the product by trucks. And I was able to track the drayage, the movement of the product in China, and I was able to declare on LinkedIn that China was back up and running 10 days before the world did, because I looked at the people moving the product and they had to wait for smog, and smog takes time to build up. And it's that simplicity. Trade takes people. So you're a person, we're all going hog wild. We all love Amazon. Are we going to stop buying from our homes? No. So this new normal that we're in, the inelasticity of the trade that we're in right now with logistics, it's going to take well over a year for this to kind of pan out. And this just takes something, because you're a person, your buying patterns, your neighbors, your family. We're never going to stop. And so trade is just another augment of forecasting the strength of the consumer, the strength of the economy, et cetera.
Lori, once again, thank you so much, for taking the time. It's fantastic to have you here. It's an honor for us, no question. The question that I have, I don't know if is this a learning lesson, or we are going to keep repeating the same mistake that we have done before. I know that even different political powers, they are using your information, your book, in order to have some clarity on this. But is there any way that we are preventing this from happening again, or we are going to run into the same cycle of mistakes, and God forbid that we are going to have another time where we are going to be just impacting the international trade by tweets, God forbid, right? But is something that is preventable, or what do you think that is going to happen? Is something that we are going to experience again, or this is a learned lesson and then we are going to just have corrections from this point on?
When it comes to maritime, it's new actors that enter the system that repeat the mistakes of those that have made them in the past, because they're arrogant enough to think that they're smarter. But the problem is they're not. You saw that in the past where the overbuilding of ships, this exuberance where, oh my gosh, and it goes in cycles, and it's distinct cycles. You can see it within the supply and demand of the new buildings of ships. We're still in the midst of this crisis. And, I would say we're still maybe in the fourth inning, like in a 9-inning baseball game. So I think when it comes to this, it's about the managing, but the problem is, for example, when you have one clog in the port system, and you see that here in the United States with LA, you see that over in the United Kingdom, there are certain ports that have inherent problems. but the carriers, the carriers, the ocean carriers, I should say, they have so many restrictions as it relates to what type of box that a terminal is allowed to accept, what type of chassis you can have, because a chassis can't just pick up any type of container. It can only pick up a certain container. So there are so many restrictions within that system, and the carriers are making a tremendous amount of money on that inefficiency. So within the logistics system, it's exceptionally fragmented. And there is a refusal, and you can see that clearly at the Port of Los Angeles. No one really wants to work together, which is a shame, because a vessel at rest is not making money. If you want the flow of trade to move, that's how you make the money. And that will lift all boats. So I think that we're still in this process where people don't care because they're making a tremendous amount of money over this inefficiency. So I think we're going to be in this point for, unfortunately, quite some time until the Biden administration, at least in the United States, really steps in. I mean, for example, I wrote a piece in one of my columns. I also write for American Shipper. And I wrote a piece where the carriers, they were on a phone call. The ocean carriers were on with the truckers, with the ports. And that $100 fee that the Port of Los Angeles is charging, the carrier told the Biden administration, we are going to pass it over to the consumer, which is the importer as well. So they're going to charge it to the consumer. Charge it to the importer, and it'll be passed over to the consumer. And we are at inflation. Biden administration didn't push back. So really, until someone puts on their big boy pants to really make tough decisions, we're going to be where we are. And you can't blame the retailers for us being addicted to our phones. Every facet within the logistical community is at blame for some part, but everybody has to work together, and we're not there.
I like it. And it reminds me of the part about where we learn about Smoot-Hawley. Yeah, so.
Exactly. And again, more regulation. And it's not like I'm one that's not for regulation. Please don't get me wrong. I mean, there's good regulation and there's bad regulation, but you have to really look at what can be done to free up the flow of trade. And you can't also just like riff on to ideas that have already happened. Yesterday, the president was at the Port of Baltimore talking about the infrastructure bill and great projects. What the Port of Baltimore is creating a tunnel for more efficiency so they can move the trucks faster in and out of the port. Also, it's very, very good for like greenhouse and things like that. That project has been in the works for 10 years. Why equate the infrastructure bill that's not even passed yet to something that's taken 10 years? And I was texting with the Port of Baltimore, and he was, and I've known him for a good time, and we razz each other. And he's like, "Oh, you're so down." And I said, "No, I'm like, listen, Trump was bad for trade too." I'm like, you need to have, if you want to speed up infrastructure, you need to eliminate the red tape. No matter what country that you live in, we all know government loves red tape. How long does it take sometimes for that pothole to be filled on your street? It takes a lot longer. It's a systemic problem, but yet nothing that we see in there are short-term solutions, and eliminating the red tape is one of those key things. But yet they tout something that was already 10 years in the making.
I wonder if there's a correlation between potholes and politics.
I think it's the same. If anybody is driven, if anybody has ever gone to Long Island, and I know some of you guys are up in Canada, but there's this, and I've got to unfortunately go out there because I'm from Long Island, and so I live in Jersey now. You go on what's called the Cross Bronx Expressway, and it's 4 lanes total, 2 on each lane, and it is absolutely horrendous. And I don't think they've ever paved it since they made it back in, I don't even know when the heck they made it, but it's been like 50 something years. So that's politics right there for you too.
Right.
When you refer to going from New Jersey to New York, You always remind me, 𝗪𝗃𝗃𝗃, but I won't say any more.
Oh, the meme of him sitting on the beach. Yeah, that's a good one.
Lori Ann, thank you so much for your time. Such a pleasure to see you again.
Yeah, same here.
Just wanted to comment as a former academics where I worked in the UK in one of the universities. Now, where I've reviewed a couple of books, academic books and practical books. I just wanted to praise you on the quality of the book because there is so much students need and want in terms of, covering that gap between the theoretical part and the practical part. And I think you've just won the challenge here. And I just wanted to say congratulations on that. And there is so much value and relevance in what you've written. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And that means a lot because, and I don't know what the television programs are up in Canada, but here in the United States, I always say that if you really want to know what's going on in U.S. politics, you watch BBC because it gives you an unvarnished look. Because honestly, when I write things, I mean, if I write a book about detailing something as a trade war, who cares what I think? My job as a journalist is to provide to you the unvarnished truth of what it is. Now, and I'm presenting it with data to support what's happened. And I think in today's world with social media, where especially with students, right, where they learn more, unfortunately on TikTok than they do, opening up a book, like a real book. It's crazy because it's people want fast and easy information, and they also they're lazy enough to just watch something they agree with. And you shouldn't have to. Don't be in a silo, expand your view. And data, like my book, really has given that historical process because I literally take you from the very beginning of the trade war all the way through, until 2019 at the end. And even now, when you look at phase one, you look at, and it's easy, the data is there. People just have to read it. China is expected to buy X, Y, and Z product. Are they? No. And that's my job. And if someone asks, are we winning the trade war? No, based on the receipt, our consumer that's obligated to buy our product is not buying it. And you can't refute it. So I really appreciate you taking the time and reading it and recognizing that there's no political agenda. It's not like Trump is the best ever, we won the trade war, or Xi's the best ever, he won the trade war. It's like, no, it's it is what it is.
Absolutely. Yeah. And certainly, there is just so much criticality that you can have on a, when we advise, for example, when we advise students to write a piece of assignment, whether a report or whatever, and, grabbing information from often journals. The only reason we were actually advising that over maybe a real book was, the gap that you could have between the data that was provided and perhaps at some point the outdated information that was in there and the actual information that you would grab, where there's a real overlap in yours, and that's what brings it to such a relevant place.
Thank you.
I don't want to put anyone on the spot. Chris?
Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks for having me on here today. Also, I'll start by saying, Benita, I like the new logo. I hadn't seen it yet, so very nice. Love it. And Lori Ann, thanks for being on the show. I am a projects guy. I'm not in trade, but on our end of the spectrum, projects and stuff are delayed quite often all the time from material delays and whatnot. So this is, I'm learning a lot more, and it's coming into play considerably. The knowledge I'm gaining from having these conversations and readings like this. My question for you would be, with the green energy shift, and I support it, I'm all over it, but do you feel some of these countries with less pressure to go full green are situated in a better position to earn more through this trade war and globalization? Because, when I look at the entire process of containerization and shipping, there's nothing green about it between the fabrication of the containers, the steel, the maintenance, the shipping, the fuel and the oil used to ship it across the country, and then the storage and like that's a fossil fuel mayhem. And also, like I said, with the fabrication of the materials as well for the storage. So do you feel that countries like China that have less pressure to go full green and get off some of these greenhouse gases may be better situated to capitalize on some of this market?
You know, I think in the end, they're probably going to receive more backlash for it. I actually have a story that I'm breaking. I wish I could share it with you, but it's not out yet. Benita, send me an email and I'll send it to you once it releases, and that way you can send it to everybody on here. There's critical data systems, right, that cover this, and maritime is one of the biggest polluters that you know quickly, of course, put out, and it's more in their emissions, right, with the fuel of choice. Originally they thought that what was it? That scrubbers put these, like, think of big Brillo brushes, like Brillo brushes. I don't know if you guys use Brillo, but like to clean out your pot. They put these special brushes in the tanks of these vessels to clean up the fuel that they were using. And it was so expensive, they stopped using them. And actually, since you're involved in this, you should definitely look at, follow Peter Sand on BIMCO. Oh, no, Peter's not with BIMCO anymore. Just look at Peter Sand, S-A-N-D. He comments a lot on my stuff at LinkedIn. This guy is the bomb. I love him. He is all about trade. He does that from BIMCO. Everything from ag. His whole thought about everything with trade and with green and all the topics that we've talked about. His audience are people that are investing in vessels. Okay, so he'll talk about 10 miles and things like that. But you can extrapolate the good nuggets, if you will, okay, on trade and on green energy. As of right now, there is a new variety of energies that they are sampling. And so what you can do is look at the new builds. Those are new buildings of vessels. And they could take anywhere from like 2 to 5 years to create these vessels. One of the biggest problems that we've seen is the emergence of the mega ship, which are gigantic, as you know. They create the sail effect, which, as you know, what created the Ever Given going sideways in the Suez Canal. So bigger is not necessarily always better. Going back to your question about like who's going to be the winner, China doesn't want to lose face. Xi, as you know, has essentially crippled his own manufacturing with the restrictions on coal and electricity right now, because you don't want to have dark skies for the Olympics. So from this point, so on and off, he wants to have those beautiful blue skies to say that China was a winner. Remember, Xi does not want to lose face. He's the ultimate egomaniac. So you have to bank on his ego, because if they come out as a big polluter and they vowed not to, he will look like a loser. So that's why I don't think that China will kind of ramp up, if you will, to take advantage of the less green, because he doesn't want to be a loser. As it relates to the other technologies, it's an open field right now. I know the International Shipping Organization that I deal with, there's going to be a very big conference this month talking about the new shipping technologies of tomorrow. So you might want to, do a quick Google on that as well. There's a lot there. I'm actually going to be writing about it. They're going to give me an advanced copy of what they're going to be presenting. So I'll be putting that out in my ship, because I've also been covering it out, the life of the seafarer. These men and women are in vessels. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, some have been on vessels for almost 2 years because they couldn't get off. And China is one of the largest offenders in denying seafarers to getting off vessels, because they want to make sure that they have the China vaccine, which a lot of the folks in China do not want to take, because it's not, the efficacy is not as good as, say, like Pfizer, Moderna, and AstraZeneca. So there's a lot of different niblets out there for you, but I highly recommend to follow Peter. If you want, Benita, if you want to send me the contact information, of him, I can try to make a connection or something. But there's a lot of, it's so fast moving that we're in the early stages of like the winners and losers.
Oh, very cool. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
We're at 10 minutes. Jim, did you have something?
Who?
Comments, questions?
I had a couple of thoughts here on some of the conversations that's been going on. Hi, Lori. I'm Jim, friend of Benita's here.
Hi.
Regarding the ships, I think Chris was talking about how badly they pollute, and frankly, the ocean-going cargo ships are put out more pollutants than many whole countries. But the flip side of that, interestingly, is that if you compare ocean shipping with any other type of shipping, rail or truck or certainly air, ocean pollutes less on a per kilo basis than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of a double-edged sword there. And Lori, I think you touched on the scrubbers for a bit there. The interesting thing there is the IMO moved toward making ships cleaner, but they were only addressing the sulfur emissions that come from the bunker fuel that they burn, and they did not address CO2 at all. One of the aspects of scrubbers is that, and I've had a conversation with a guy who's an expert on emissions and biofuels and such, and he said, so they take all this sulfur out of, and it actually comes out of the exhaust fumes. It's not in the tank. I think it's in the exhaust systems of the vessels. And so after they burn it, they use those scrubbers to extract out the sulfur so the sulfur doesn't go up into the sky. And I said, so what do they do with that sulfur after they've collected it all? And he says, oh, they just dump it in the ocean. So I don't know if that's any better or worse, but and so a lot of companies have gone in another direction. They've gone toward liquid natural gas. There's not so much in the way of sulfur emissions, but they still put out as much CO2 as the oil, and so we're still not addressing the CO2 issue there. Switching gears
Well, and
on
that's
another.
but that's also why.
Go ahead.
Oh,
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. I was going to say that's also why you don't see a clear winner, because every time you had a solution, and you saw, oh, this is the new solution. LNG is the thing of tomorrow. No, it's not. Every time they come up with something and you've hit it all on the head, it's not the end all be all solution. And so they also have to figure out too, like the basket of energies. There's even like a solar vessel out there now. It's I don't know. There is no clear winner from what we have right now. I'm sorry. Continue.
Switching gears here, we started talking about the tariffs, and Benita brought up 𝗵𝗇. That's a lesson from 100 years ago that we seem to have completely forgotten. We put all those tariffs on goods from China, and I've worked with clients to move production out of China to other Asian locations, and only move in a portion of their production out. And I've worked with them to establish the country of origin in another place. And even though it has to go back to China for some additional work, they maintain that other country's country of origin to avoid the tariffs. Now, those factories that a lot of those goods are going to in Vietnam and Thailand, they're actually owned by the original factory back in China. So the profits are all going back to China anyway. So have we accomplished anything with those tariffs? Is the presidential administration looking at extending these tariffs to some of these other countries like Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, wherever else some of this manufacturing went to?
You know, I actually hit on in the trade war book what you're just talking about. For folks that aren't aware of what's called, it's the Intra-Asia trade. And so what happens is, and what you saw at the very beginning of COVID, you would have, because China was shut down and other areas weren't, because these companies own these facilities in the other countries, be it Vietnam, Malaysia, wherever, the managers couldn't get out to go and work at those other, the facility that they were supposed to manage. And so that's why you had such incomplete product, because you would have a coat to go back and forth to the various countries several times before it's finally done. Biden has been very straightforward in keeping the tariffs. Next week, CNBC, my colleague, actually, 𝗫𝗿𝗃𝗀𝗃, she broke it today on the network that she and Biden are going to be meeting next week for some sort of bilat. We'll see what happens, but it's very, very muddy. Vietnam was the clear winner of the trade war from a trade aspect, because you did have that movement of companies like, like you pointed out, like Nike, they, moved over to Vietnam. Unfortunately, because of COVID, moving to Vietnam, Nike was a big loser this year because, they were shut down for 106 days. The 𝗁𝗄𝗵, which is where one of the facilities is. You did have Trump, pounding his chest about adding Vietnam to the list, but it didn't happen. You have not heard Biden talk about that, and I don't think you will, because when you look at the GDP of Vietnam and you look at the lack of product that has left there because of COVID, they're not winning anymore. And so the other thing is, which is very important for everybody in this room to understand, when you're looking at China and their GDP, China's GDP is based on manufacturing. And there are many different ways that you can have your pay for your product, meaning like in the United States. You can either pay for the product once the container goes on the vessel, or once it gets to your warehouse in whatever country you're in. And because of the shipping delays that we have, and because of the lack of movement of many of these containers, China's GDP is artificially down because they're not getting paid right now. They eventually will be. So when people talk about China's GDP down, it is not down, because they're making product for all of us all around the world. So that's also a very important key to kind of look at. And then the other thing is, going back to that intra-Asia trade, you now have, because a lot of the carriers are kind of blanking sailings to kind of be a little bit faster to get the flow of trade going worldwide, Vietnam are using shore boats to go to China, to Hong Kong, and then they're air freighting their product out of Hong Kong into the United States and other parts of the world, because they've got to get their product out.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Lori, for dropping in. There's still 2 more book club sessions for this book. Don't forget to get your copy. And I'll let Lori address the questions if she has time in the comments afterwards. I don't know how I can push them to her.
Do you want to just take like a screenshot of them for me?
Yeah, or I can draw your name into the ones that I think you can answer best, and in that way, in LinkedIn.
Okay.
So then we can answer them there.
Yeah, sure. That's easy. Yeah, I'm using my phone, so you know how small these screens are. I only get like 2 or 3 questions per per screenshot. But yeah, I'll be more than happy to answer questions or whatever. And I'm deeply humbled that you guys chose my book. I worked my 𝗄𝗃𝗃𝗀𝗃 on that book, and unfortunately, I was competing against the Trump impeachment trial. So.
Right.
So the media really didn't care. The media did not care. I pushed my publisher saying, for the love of God, let's get the book out in September or October. And he's like, no, let's do it in November. And I'm like, you don't understand. No one's going to care. I couldn't compete. I just couldn't compete.
Yeah, no, it's very relevant. And I think it will be for the coming years, Lori.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that some politicians care, like Jared Bernstein, who's one of President Biden's economic advisors. I've known Jared for years because he was a CNBC contributor. He's read my book. And he was always so cute, you know, saying, like when he would do a live shot on CNBC, he'd be like, "Did you see my book? It was in the library." And I'm thinking to myself, you got 500 books behind you. No one's going to know. I'm like, "Thank you, Jared." Like, I was like, "Thank you so much." And I would freeze it just to see if I can see it, you know. No, I couldn't see it, but I was just grateful, you know. So, you know, at least you know that some of the economic advisors in the Biden administration, and there are others that have read the book too.
Right.
That they know the reality, you know.
And if we can drive book sales for you, like we would be very happy. But also,
Well,
if we
thank
get
you.
into trouble about the copyright, because I wonder if it's like illegal to read excerpts publicly.
I don't think so. I mean, my publisher knows. I mentioned it to him. I said, "Hey, I'm like, trade war. I'm like, there's a book club reading a book." And I mean, not saying like no one's bought the book. I mean, please don't, you know, don't take it the wrong way. But yeah, he was fine with it. He
Okay.
was absolutely fine with it. I didn't hear anything. And one of the publishing execs actually commented on Jose's LinkedIn post.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for dropping in on us, Lori Ann. Really appreciate it. Appreciate all of you. Next week, we're going to be doing this very same thing. We're going to be going into chapters 3, 4, 5. So get read up, guys.
We'll be there.
We are going to be ready.
Awesome. And if Lori Ann wants to drop by, she's always welcome, but we understand she has a schedule to keep as well.
Yeah, it just depends. It just, I was happy to get on. My phone's gone off 5 times since I've been on here, so I kind of dread the voicemails.
We love you, Lori. Thank you for joining.
Take care.
Thank you. Thank you so much, guys. All right, take care. Have a good day, guys.
You
Thank
too.
you.
We're still live. I wonder if you guys, thank you so much for joining. And don't forget, we'll be here next week again. And get your book. Get your book.
You know, Benita, coming from someone who is not a part of trade, this has been really interesting and has stimulated my thinking and given me a much better picture of the importance of trade and the impact that it has on our economy and even our individual lives that we really just take for granted. I go to the store, I buy it, it's there. No, you need to think about how this got here and what they had to go through in order for this to be taken from someplace on the other side of the world to put it in your hands while you're here. And that's what this has given me some thought about. It's like, I just never really give it any thought. And now this has opened my eyes to the importance of trade and the fact that there are, in fact, trade wars and how people impact the goods that we get and they impact the prices that we pay based on the interactions and relationships and, you know, who's going to be making the most noise and who has the impact. This has been very stimulating. So I'm just like sitting like a fly on the wall listening to this, and it has been just absolutely educational for me. And so I really thank you for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to listen to all of your guests and friends who know so much about trade. And so now I feel like I'm just a little bit smarter when it comes down to international trade. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vernon. That's what I love about Book Club is that we all come from different walks of life. You don't need to be in our industry to get it. It's all about people, right?
Yeah, always.
And thank you, Jose, for hosting us on your StreamYard and your LinkedIn Live access. I really appreciate that. Book Club has reached another level. We're up in our game.
There you go. Yes,
go.
that is correct. I'm just here to learn, basically.
And
Welcome to the club.
definitely every day.
See you all next week.
See you next week.
Thank you, Benita.